The assassin baby, Brandon Moreno from Tijuana, Mexico, has got his first ever victory in Mexico City, Mexico, as he defeats the former title challenger Steve Erceg via unanimous decision in a 25-minute back-and-forth high-level chess match on the feet. Flyweight division, flyweight elite of the elite was on full display once again. This was a massive fight for the title picture in the flyweight division heading into UFC Mexico this past Saturday, March 29th, where we would see the number 2 ranked former 2-time champion in this division, Brandon Moreno, taking on the number 8 ranked former title challenger, Steve Erceg. For Brandon, it was a chance to make it 2 victories in a row. His other victory was in November against Amir Albazi in one of, if not the best performances of Brandon Moreno's career. And should he beat Steve Erceg, which we know in the aftermath, that is what exactly happened. He's on a 2-fight win streak. He holds his spot in the top 3 of this flyweight division and kind of solidifies himself as the next man up. But we'll get more into that in a second. And for Steve Erceg, he was trying to bounce back from 2 consecutive losses in 2024, one being a title fight to Alexandre Pantoja, and the other a knockout loss to the other number 1 contender, Kai Kara-France, at UFC 305 in August. But I guess we'll start with the challenger, because Steve Erceg now finds himself having lost 3 fights in a row after starting his UFC career 3-0. But it's clear as ever, especially in this fight against Brandon Moreno, that Steve Erceg is amongst the best of the best in this flyweight division. He went toe-to-toe with Brandon Moreno, and yes, while the judges all agreed it was 4-1 on the side of the former 2-time champion, it was not some victory for Brandon where he just ran away with things as the fight went on. It was very competitive, very back and forth, and it was truly a game of inches where Steve Erceg just didn't have as many big moments as Brandon Moreno. It was more so the volume and the jab specifically of Erceg that was doing most of his work. Whereas Brandon Moreno was mixing in big looping shots, putting together much more impactful combinations, 2, 3, 4 punches, head, body, legs, everywhere is what Brandon Moreno was mixing it up with, and Steve Erceg just wasn't able to hit that next gear. And while yes, he's on a 3-fight skid, first of all, I just said how incredible this fight was, a chess match where Erceg showed he is still a title challenging worthy fighter in this flyweight division. And the other 2 losses, Kai Kara-France, the longtime veteran, arguably next man up for the champion Alexandre Pantoja, which is the 3rd loss for Steve Erceg, which he took just 11 months after signing with the organization and on relative short notice, heading to enemy territory in Brazil. As a matter of fact, all 3 of Steve Erceg's losses in the UFC have been in enemy territory where, yes, I know he is also Australian like Kai Kara-France, but still, he loses to Alexandre Pantoja in Brazil. He loses in Australia to fellow Aussie Kai Kara-France, and then he loses in Mexico to the Mexican Brandon Moreno. This man will fight whoever, wherever, and it's pretty clear. So a fight that I would really love to see in the aftermath is Steve Erceg versus Kai Asakura, the UFC newcomer who in his very first fight in the promotion, the former Rizin champion, took on Alexandre Pantoja at UFC 310 in December of last year, where he put up a hell of a fight before being submitted in the 2nd round to the dominant champion that is Pantoja. That is the fight to make, in my opinion. High level. It could be a flyweight main event on a fight night card. It can be a featured bout on a pay-per-view card. That is going to be a fantastic fight with plenty of intriguing storylines heading in as to what could be next for their career. Steve Erceg trying to fend off 4 consecutive losses. Kai Asakura trying to prove that he belongs in the UFC. And of course it means who can stay amongst the elite of the elite in this flyweight division and stay in title talks. So question 1 of the show, is that what you want to see next for Steve Erceg, former title challenger, versus Kai Asakura, former title challenger? Plenty of pedigree, obvious that the high-level skill sets are there for both, but they just aren't riding momentum at the current state. Now they clash together, something's got to give, someone has to get a victory, and another falls lower down the totem pole. And now for the winner, Brandon Moreno. This guy just continues to get better fight by fight and evolve his skill sets. This one here, no real grappling involved in this entire 25-minute bout. It was a back and forth boxing match with a few kicks sprinkled here and there. Brandon Moreno in the aftermath talking to DC, saying who is the best boxer in the UFC, DC, and he is absolutely amongst the conversation of the UFC for the best strikers and specifically best boxers, which is what Mexico has been known for delivering in combat sports for hundreds of years. But it's not just the traditional boxing that differentiates Brandon Moreno from the rest. It is his unique movement, his stances, the way that he can hide his shots and then out of nowhere bring the right hook, bring the uppercut, bring the left cross. I mean, everything he does to the head, to the body, even with some of the leg kicks that he sprinkles in. He is a very unique puzzle to solve in this flyweight division, and only the best of the best in this weight class have been able to solve that puzzle. But it seems as though there's no one else for this man to fight, because he bounces back after a 2-fight losing streak and an 8-month hiatus in November and puts on a masterful performance against the surging Amir Albazi, who was undefeated in the UFC going into that fight. And here has an incredibly high-level fight against Steve Erceg, where he had to weather some adversity, take a round where he even lost, and potentially a second round. Steve Erceg put up a hell of a fight in this one, but Moreno just did that much more to prove he still is one of, if not the second best flyweights on planet Earth right now. But the problem is there's another man that is arguably the number one contender in this flyweight division, and that is the aforementioned Kai Kara-France. We last saw him in August at UFC 305, where he knocked out Steve Erceg, as we talked about a couple of minutes ago, and for the champion Alexandre Pantoja, he beat Kaya Sakura via submission at UFC 310. Has not had a fight booked since then, which is kind of surprising because we now know that May is booked, so the closest or nearest fight that we could see this championship be defended is June. I believe June 7th at UFC 316, and then obviously we have the International Fight Week card at the end of June, so I'd say we likely see Pantoja at one of those two events. And being that June isn't too far away from this March 29th date for Brandon Moreno, I think it's safe to say he, with this 2-fight win streak against the caliber of opponents that the wins were against, can wait and get the winner of what is more than likely the next flyweight championship fight, Kai Kara-France versus Alexandre Pantoja. And I do just want to mention one thing that came kind of under the radar in the news this week, and I didn't mention it on Friday because it wasn't 100% confirmed by the UFC, but there are rumors and strong leanings that the former title challenger in the UFC, Kyoji Horiguchi, will be returning to the organization. Ariel Helwani said that they also have interest in booking him against Tagir Ulanbekov, and one must think that if he can come back and get a victory in his return to the organization, he puts himself right there immediately into title contention as well. So I think that's something to consider, something to maybe keep in mind. And honestly, if Brandon Moreno wanted to fight again, I think him versus Kyoji Horiguchi would be an incredible true number one contender fight. But if I had to guess right now, I think it's Brandon Moreno that waits on the sideline for what is more than likely a June title fight between Pantoja and Kai Kara-France. He gets the winner of that at the end of 2025. But do you agree with that, or do you think there's something else that I'm missing in this flyweight title picture? Please be sure to let me know down in the comments below. Is it going to be Pantoja versus Kai Kara-France? Is there something else waiting in the wings for the dominant champion that is Pantoja? Did Brandon Moreno, with this performance over Erceg, even jump over Kai Kara-France in line for a title shot? Give me your thoughts on the cloudy gray area that is the UFC flyweight title picture down below. And now that we are done with the UFC Mexico main event discussion, let's jump into the rest of the card, and it starts in the co-main event of the evening, where Manuel Torres got the biggest win of his career and bounced back from his own devastating knockout loss at Noche UFC last September. El Loco, Manuel Torres, 16-3, 30 years old, right in his prime, 15 finishes out of those 16 victories, 8 by knockout, 7 by submission, a Swiss Army knife, now 4-1 in the UFC, and a victory on Dana White's Contender Series. All 5 of those victories under the UFC banner are by finish. Not to mention, all by first round finish. And the only loss on his resume is to Ignacio Bahamondes, and we've seen how well that loss has aged, as just a couple of weeks ago at UFC 313, Ignacio finished Jalen Turner in the very first round via submission in their fight, and now finds himself as a ranked lightweight. So Manuel Torres is right on the outside looking in of the top 15 at 155, and he showed that with a devastating finish over the longtime veteran Drew Dober, where he finished him via knockout in just 1 minute and 45 seconds. seconds. And while I'm not taking anything away from Manuel Torres because he absolutely got the knockout victory here, this stoppage was much too egregious and it was much too late. Drew Dober had 15 to 20 unanswered shots landed on him before the referee stepped in there. Mike Beltran, the big beard, bodybuilding looking dude who traditionally and historically is a great referee. This one here, just not his best performance, not his best decision making. But as I said to one of my buddies last night, actually it was Noah as a matter of fact, the former co-host of this very podcast, usually we don't see late stoppages. Those are a little bit more rare. It's usually stoppages that are too early and are controversial because maybe a fighter could have came back and won. This one was on the opposite end of the spectrum, so I do feel for Drew Dober, who now finds himself having lost, I think, 4 of his last 5 bouts, and multiple of those by way of finish. But honestly, like a performance like this, I would not be upset one bit if Manuel Torres got to take on a ranked lightweight next, because I think he has earned it with his finishing prowess and his high-level performances. So how about a fight with someone like a Joel Alvarez or a Drakkar Klose? Guys that are right there on the outside looking in, that are veterans of the UFC and can present problems to their opponents, specifically Joel Alvarez, who I feel can be a very big-time player in this lightweight division moving forward. Whatever you think could be next for Manuel, he's going to deliver a fan-friendly fight, and for that, he is must-watch television. Edgar Chairez got a huge first-round finish over CJ Vergara in just 2 minutes and 30 seconds. All 12 of his professional victories are by way of finish. 4 knockouts, 8 submissions, 29 years old, right in his prime, and much like Manuel Torres, much like Brandon Moreno, he hails from Mexico and got the victory in front of his home country, and the crowd went bananas. He's won 2 of his last 3 fights, and the only loss to Joshua Van, a number 14 ranked flyweight in the world, who is one of the biggest prospect age 25 and under right now in the organization. Much like Manuel Torres, I wouldn't be upset at all if Edgar Chairez got a ranked flyweight in his next matchup, and if not, he's 1 win away before either challenging someone else with a ranking or getting his own ranking next to his name. Edgar Chairez, Manuel Torres, must watch television, kill or be killed. And still, the youngest fighter on the roster, Raul Rosas Jr., at 20 years young, got his 5th victory inside of the promotion, and this time it comes via unanimous decision against the veteran and 2 stint in the UFC, Vince Morales. But this one, much like his victory at Noche UFC in September against Arichi Lang, did not come without some adversity, and this one, much more adversity, as Vince Morales had Raul Rosas Jr. locked in multiple submissions, Darce chokes, Peruvian neckties even, as I heard Laura Sanko talking about on the broadcast, something you don't see very often. He had to escape danger. He had to weather storms. He had to face adversity. That's something Noah and I used to talk about all the time for young prospects that are getting gradual steps up in the UFC. It's fun in games when you just see them go in and starch everyone and the hype and the momentum's all around them. But it's another thing when they can go up against veterans like Arichi Lang, like Vince Morales, and go through the fire, have moments for themselves early on in the fight for Raul, where he looked very dominant, very strong, but as the fight goes on, when you have to grit it out, when you have to push harder than you've ever pushed before, and you can come out the other side as the victor, that says a lot about a fighter, and that's what Raul has been able to do twice in a row, and I think that is invaluable experience for someone as young in the game as him. Again, 20 years old, already 6 UFC fights and a Dana White Contender Series fight, and of those 7, 6 of them are victories, and the only loss is to Christian Rodriguez, who is an absolute dog in this bantamweight division. Raul Rosas Jr. has his eyes set on breaking John Jones' record of becoming the youngest champion in UFC history, and he has 3 years in order to do so, and with 5 victories already under his belt, 4 of them consecutive in a row, it's not out of the realm of possibility that in 2027, 2028, Raul Rosas Jr. may not only be in title contention, but he may be the youngest champion in UFC history. Mexico just continued to dominate the night as David Martinez made his UFC debut and got a vicious first-round knockout against Saimon Oliveira in 4 minutes and 38 seconds. Started with a knee, finished it with the punches. He's a 2024 Dana White Contender Series alum where he got a decision victory there in October. 12-1 as a professional, 10 of those 12 by knockout, 26 years old. This bantamweight division has prospects for days. It may not be the best division in the UFC because I think that belongs to lightweight, but it damn sure may be the deepest division if you go from number 1 to number 50 plus. There is talent sprinkled in at 135 all over the place, with skill sets varying in all different facets of mixed martial arts. And David Martinez, the Black Spartan from Mexico City, Mexico, he was not only the home country fighter, but the home city fighter. They went bananas when this knockout occurred. My hat is off to you, David. Welcome to the UFC. And from one UFC debutant to another, Ateba Gautier, wow, we have a middleweight Francis Ngannou on our hands. 22 years old, hailing from Cameroon in Africa, much like Francis Ngannou, who became the heavyweight champion of the world, who is now, I guess, kind of the PFL, Bellator, whatever you want to call it, champion of the world, boxed against Anthony Joshua, boxed against Tyson Fury, has gone on to do incredible things, and Ateba Gautier is now following in his fellow countrymen's footsteps, and he made good on his UFC debut with a vicious knockout over the ultra-durable Jose Medina. He did it in 3 minutes and 32 seconds. As a matter of fact, becomes the first man to ever finish Jose Medina by way of knockout. He's 7-1 as a professional, and 6 of those 7 victories are by way of KO, TKO, including his 2024 Dana White Contender Series appearance. He is 6'4". He is extremely long and rangy. He looks like he's been chiseled out of stone. This man is a dangerous man in this middleweight division. This is one of the must-watch prospects in 2025 who could, at the end of the year, be newcomer of the year. Look for Ateba Gautier. Put him on your radars right now. He's a player. I've got to talk about my girl, Loopy Godinez, as she gets the job done once more and holds on to her number 11 ranking in the strawweight division. She takes out Julia Polastri via unanimous decision, 29-28 across the board, where in rounds 1 and rounds 2, she looked like one of the best strawweights on planet Earth. And as I said on X, she has had multiple UFC fights where she genuinely looks like one of the best strawweights in the world, but the problem is inconsistency. If she can put these types of performances together fight after fight, I absolutely believe she can be a champion. And of course I tweet that out in between rounds 2 and 3, where in round 3 she nearly got finished and had to weather an insane storm in what was the best round of 2025 in the UFC so far. Julia Polastri started pouring it on, was landing vicious combinations and landing clean, powerful, damaging, and impactful shots that had Loopy dazed and confused a couple of times in there. But Loopy was bringing it back to her with her own shots, landing some good combinations, and showed her durability, showed her grit, showed her toughness, and got the much-needed victory to keep herself from losing 3 consecutive fights. And I believe this fight was kind of, sort of, relative short notice. It wasn't her originally scheduled opponent in Julia Polastri, but Loopy Godinez put her number 11 spot on the line against someone with only 2 UFC fights. For that, I feel she should be awarded. Let's take a quick look at the strawweight division. As I look ahead up in the rankings, I think I see 2 fights that make a lot of sense to me. One could be Yasmin Lucindo, who's coming off of a loss to Amanda Lemos, the former title challenger. She currently finds herself at number 8 in the world right now at strawweight. And the other is one of my other favorite female fighters, Amanda Ribas, who sits at number 7 and who has been bouncing back and forth between flyweight and strawweight. I think any of those 2 ladies make sense for Loopy Godinez in her next fight, who, part of the reason that she may have not come on as strong in round 3 is because, well, you're doing amazing. And last but not least, let's talk about Jamall Emmers, who had a insanely violent knockout over Gabriel Miranda in 4 minutes and 6 seconds into the first round of their fight. Since making his debut in March of 2020 against Giga Chikadze of all people, Jamall Emmers has quite literally lost 1, won one, lost one, won one. And so it was pretty clear he was going to win here against Gabriel Miranda because he was coming in off of a loss to Nate the Train Landwehr. And that is exactly what he did, although he did have to weather some adversity in the early moments of the fight where he got bombarded with strikes and locked into a submission on the side of Gabriel Miranda, who has finished 16 of his 17 by submission. And Jamall, credit to him, was able to stay calm, composed, flip position, get the fight back to the feet, and finish with a nasty KO. But unfortunately, the trend for Jamall Emmers, no disrespect to him, is that he's going to lose his next fight. So can he put away this pattern of win one, lose one, and make it consecutive victories for the first time in the UFC? That is it for today's recap of UFC Mexico, all things UFC Mexico, and I want to get your thoughts on the performances, on the big-time outings in the comments below. Firstly, what is next for Brandon Moreno, who now finds himself on a 2-fight win streak and holding his place at number 2 in the world at flyweight? Is it an immediate title shot? Is it facing the winner of a Kai France Alexandre Pantoja championship fight, or is it something else? If you enjoyed this recap, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Every single week I recap the most meaningful results from every card heading into each fight week. I talk about and preview the biggest fights and discuss the best storylines and what is at stake, and I give my thoughts and opinions on MMA news and fight announcements. You can also join the community on social media at Verbal Spar MMA on X, Instagram, and TikTok. And you can follow on your favorite audio listening platforms such as Spotify and Apple, where every Monday and Friday podcast episodes release there. Have a great week, and I will see you all in the next video.